Okay. I will call the meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee together for Tuesday, June 18th. It is 6:05 p.m. And I wanted to welcome our two new members, Fred Chase and Mary McGrath. Was the only one left standing in the Budget and Finance Committee from the last one, because our two esteemed colleagues left and didn't seek re-election. So nice for you to be here. Looking forward to it. So, Deb, quick question. It says approval of meeting minutes.
There are none right now.
There aren't any because, and nobody can really vote them anyway because they weren't at that meeting. So,
Right.
okay. When we get it, I guess we'll accept it and place it on file because I don't think we can approve it.
Yep.
Okay. Is there anybody on Zoom for public comment?
No, it's not advertising as a meeting. It's in person.
Okay, so no public comment. We will go right into legislation referred, and we'll go in order. It's the same agenda from the other meeting we didn't have. Finance Committee did meet last night. I wasn't able to go because Massasoit had their delayed graduation, got rained out the day of graduation, so they're doing 3 separate graduations. And I went to that last night. I didn't go to finance. I will take up order 0 FY 24-041 town clerk salary.
Do you want me to give a little update?
Yes,
Just
please.
so, because I know, we're all sort of new. The town clerk salary is the only full-time position that the council sets the salary for. So otherwise, I set the salaries, or it's all pursuant to collective bargaining agreements, and the council ratifies or votes that as part of the budget. This, so you guys are the ones that set the town clerk's salary. So what we have done with the town clerk, just to make it fair, over the years, we did a classification study a number of years ago. Classification put everybody on different grades. So the more very basically, the more responsibility you have in town, the higher the grade level. So the clerk's position was put at grade 13. When Mary Lee was the clerk, we slotted her into the step schedule. Well, let me back up. So you have grades and then steps. So increasing responsibility, you have an increasing grade. Each year, very rare exception, each year you climb a step. Sort of rewards you for additional experience. At least that's the theory. And so we have 12 steps, and I think we have about 15 or 16 grades, something like that. Mm-hmm. And some of the grades have no positions in them, so they're just there for future years. Mm-hmm. In this case, the town clerk's position was put at grade 13. And Mary Lee, I believe, was at step 8 or 9? 8?
Grade 13, step 8.
Okay, so she was at step 8. We have a new person there, and as is our, and this is what we do on the non-clerk side. If we have a new employee coming in that we think is going to be promising, we'll hire them. They've got no experience, they go on step 1. In some cases, if we hire somebody, say, for a library position, and they've got direct library experience that is just exactly what the position calls for, we've got flexibility in most of our collective bargaining agreements to put that person somewhere else on the scale. But that happens every now and then. But generally, somebody coming into a job with no experience, we put at step 1. So I think when Kevin sponsored this, I think that was his thought. The grade 13, there's no difference there. And then step 1 reflecting Tina's inexperience with town clerk stuff. So I think that's the rationale there. But as I say, it's the council's job to set the salary. So that's why it's in front of you.
Question?
No, I think that's fine. You completely explain it to me, and
looking at the future budget for the town clerk, I think it goes along with that. I looked at the town clerk, I think by 2025, I see it moving up. So I think it's right on.
Fred, did you go to the budget and finance?
I viewed the video.
Okay, and what happened? I wasn't able to go.
They voted in favor of the recommendation, quite unanimously.
Okay.
Although they had very little discussion about the actual salary amount. Most of their discussion focused on, frankly, the matter of whether or not one or even two of the members might recuse themselves, which ultimately they did not. But I should qualify that. One member did, in fact, recuse himself, and the chair had convinced him otherwise.
Oh, okay.
So he did vote in favor. The bottom line is they approved it. Quite sure it was unanimous ultimately, but with very little discussion as to any particular aspects of the salary. My concern, and I did send this very briefly to Michael previously, just that I felt that it's worth our consideration. In other words, I think that the topic of this particular salary is one that should be thoughtfully considered. And I think that I didn't see evidence of that taking place at the Finance Committee, regrettably. So maybe this is the place, but what I particularly have in mind is the fact that the previous town clerk served 3 successive terms. She was elected 3 times. She served 9 years in the role. And after 9 years, her salary finally reached, I guess it was the $90,000 mark. I think it was even higher, but the point is, her salary, and the council considered this over the years, that her salary was below par for that position compared with other towns. And so incrementally over the course of a number of years, the council did increase that salary. But again, it's a person who in her last year had 8 years of direct experience.
Yeah.
And of course, she came from a previous career in state government. Now, we realize it's an elected position. Okay, if it were an appointed position, there would be a lot more scrutiny as to the person's qualifications and experience. Now, this is not to say by any stretch that I have any particular concerns in that regard. Frankly, I think the new town clerk will do very well. I know that she's very dedicated and very responsible. I also know that her staff is very supportive and extremely knowledgeable. So I don't really have concerns in that regard, but I think in terms of what the citizens see, and there has previously in recent months been expressed to us in council concern with respect to certain salaries. Now we know that during the period of time during which the town manager's salary was under discussion, there was discussion about that, concern about that in some quarters. We also know that in the council chamber, when the very prospect of a $5,000 councilor stipend some years in the future may or may not ever come to fruition, but the $5,000 figure for some people was beyond the pale. Yeah. So there's concern over salaries. And for someone in the community who doesn't have the information about the history and what this position and frankly, the discussion, for example, that Michael has just provided us, those details, they see someone with no direct experience coming into a $82,000 year job with benefits. And a bonus of some type, a stipend, a registrar stipend of $850. So so I wanted there at least to be conversation about this. And seeing as I did that it didn't take place in the finance committee, I thought it's either going to take place here or it'll take place in the council chamber, but it'll take place. So,
Well,
Quick question, about, I don't know if you were on the council when the town clerk salary was drastically cut. So then it took forever
Well-
to raise that salary back to a level. It's all
That's
before
right.
my time. I didn't even live in the town.
right, yeah,
And I think that was unfortunate.
Yeah.
And I think it hurt the cause. Did you know for a fact that she's not taking, she sent an email out for the health insurance, and I know the reason why. The reason why is because she's actually on,
but we don't want to get into the particulars, okay? And I'm familiar with that fact. I saw that she raised that. And you know, I retired 4 years ago.
yeah,
And if I had ever said to my employer, you know, because it's true, I don't take the insurance at my former employer. I still to this day have coverage under my wife's employer.
yeah,
All right. If I ever said, you know what, since I don't use your insurance, you know, give me something. Some kind of consideration, I would be laughed out of the building.
I'm not sure she actually.
No, she didn't
like that.
suggest that, but she brought it up for some reason,
So
for our
you-
consideration.
Well,
So your concern is you want to lower it?
Well, let's put it this way. If we were to do that, there are other considerations that mitigate against that. One is, we have to keep in mind the scale at which her subordinates,
Yeah,
Are
they're right close
compensated.
by.
right? And her subordinates, or at least the assistant town clerk, is in fact a union member.
right,
Provided by collective bargaining.
Right.
So that's certainly something we have to consider. Also, I think that if we were to contemplate a proposed reduction from the $82,000 figure, I would only propose a relatively modest reduction. Whatever that means. I mean, I don't know. To throw a figure out,
The
72,000.
question I have, Fred, is the town council voted on this financial budget. And under the town clerk, it has in this year 85,000.
Mhm.
And in 2005, it has 89,638. So you voted, this is what a town clerk
Well,
should be getting.
but the budget is a projection. Okay.
So you don't stick
And,
to it.
and it's not to say that amounts cannot differ when when the rubber meets the road, right?
Yeah.
I mean, either up or down.
So when she was voted in, does she know amount that she was going to get paid, or was it up in the air? I mean, you've paid her
Well,
since.
What she would know is the fact that every year the council votes her compensation.
Right, but when she got voted in, did she know
I
what
don't know
amount
what she
was
knew
gonna-
when she was voted in.
Well, she's been paid, right? Does that reflect the 400, the amount she gets per hour?
I believe it reflects this proposal, what, you know,
So isn't this a legal binding contract? I mean, we told her we'd pay her this, we've been paying her that, and she's been doing her job.
no, that's a really good question there. So when you vote a budget, you vote a number that you think it will take to get you through the fiscal year, obviously.
not to exceed.
That does not mean that whatever is voted in the contract is what your respective salary is going to be. We give you all kinds of data, I think we show every single employee, what we project their salary to be, and so forth. But that doesn't mean, and most of it is pursuant to a collective bargaining agreement, so that makes it easy on our end.
Yeah.
But, on occasion, in the middle of the fiscal year, we'll lose somebody, they'll go to another town, and we'll have to fill that position. And sometimes, in order to fill that position, we have to give, pay a slightly more than that position is, and sometimes slightly less.
Well, that's why
So-
you raised the department heads, 8.5% to 10% increase, because you were afraid of losing.
It depends,
I mean,
it depends on
for
who it
this
is.
one you did,
Yeah,
yeah.
it depends on who it is.
So I've gone through it, and there's a couple of them. To me, it's like she was working for an accountant, he gave her rave reviews. She's very dedicated. And now to take that away, I think it would be,
Well, but it's a fair point. I understand what you're saying, but you know, it's honestly not taking away. This is the time at which we decide.
yeah,
And that would have been true on election night, right? You know, she would have an understanding of what the previous town clerk was earning and, you know, maybe even what the council would be considering, but it's only when 9 votes are taken in the next room that in fact it is in concrete. Now,
Quick question
Mhm.
about, you just threw out a number of 7.
Well, seven, I
That's not
threw it
what
out
you're
as a-
necessarily
right,
proposing.
that's right.
It's my understanding that Jolie, with that number, the 82, is $2,000 less than what the clerk would be making. So I wouldn't want to see it go that
Yeah.
far back.
Um,
I-
Well, you know, what it comes down to is this, you know, we've had a discussion now.
Yeah.
I mean, frankly, if none of the three of us have any problem with the amount that's proposed, so be it. We're gonna vote on it and approve it, okay?
Yeah.
I think that for the benefit of people who ultimately will, all three of them, view this video.
Yeah.
They at least will know that we
Yes.
had a discussion about it because there's this sense, and it's a misconception, but there's a sense that a good deal of what we do is kind of a rubber stamp. And there's no thoughtful consideration going on, and that's wrong, but people don't know that we meet in meetings like this
yeah.
Right,
before we meet there where we kind of hammer
correct.
things very quickly.
Well, I mean, Stephen, the town manager said how Council Perry came up with it. I think that's easy to explain to him. I mean, she's starting at grade 13, step 1. It's not like we're starting her at step 7.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So I understand because federal and state do these steps. And, you
Yeah.
know, and I feel like she has experience because working for a comp. I mean, she's
Oh,
very
I know,
meticulous in
I
what
know.
she does. and-
I know, but it's private sector and, you know, it is a
Yeah,
different
but I mean,
ballgame.
what she has to do in her
Yeah.
job. You know what I mean? Like,
That's right.
you know, she's gonna be very good at the voting because everything has to balance. So I
Okay.
think that's a huge thing.
Yep.
You
No,
know,
her
she
staff
has-
will absolutely make her shine. I have no doubt about
Oh,
that.
yeah, it's great. I mean, it's great crew to have to be trained on.
So we hear a motion from some, I'm not gonna make
I'll have a
motions,
motion to
just
keep it.
So-
Amount,
keep it at,
87,127.
is it 87, I thought it was 80.
Mine has 87.
It's,
87,
87,127.
Oh, that's correct. So there's a motion. Is there a second?
I was second.
Okay, any further discussion?
No.
Okay, call for a vote. All in favor? Aye. Yes. And as you said, Fred, it could be brought up. It's just a recommendation to.
Oh, right. That's right.
There may be discussion here. Okay, let's go to next to order 0 FY 24-042, transfer order capital appropriation. Mr. Town Manager.
This is one of our annual capital appropriations, and so the use, and I was going to say it's annual, so we do it every year.
Yeah.
The point of this one is to cover all of our pre-existing obligations. So you'll see I'll use the uses of funds first. We're paying, we do a lease to own program for pretty much all of our vehicles. So we've done a lease to own for a fire engine. 2 of 5 means we're in the second year of a 5-year commitment. Radio equipment, same thing, 4 or 5 years. Ambulance is the second of 5 years. Cameras, fourth of 5 years. The town of Rainham Old High School purchase, we're in the 5th of 12 years, and that is, if you recall, we negotiated a buyout, which had been a lingering sore issue for ever since the high school was being planned. So we finally settled that. We're about to fund the 5th of 12 years. So it's $70,000 a year, and then I think in the last couple of years it drops down to 40, something like that. John Deere loader, same thing, third payment of 5, and then 2 Freightliners. We're in the 4th year of 5 on those. So that's what it pays. Where it comes from, the 543,127.74 is money that came to us originally as free cash, and then the council voted an allocation. So you voted to allocate a certain amount to capital stabilization. You voted to allocate a certain amount to employee, what do we call it, the employee liability.
Liability fund.
So basically sick buyback
Yeah.
that we have to incur. And then
Stabilization,
the regular stabilization, then there's,
one time.
oh yeah, we do a little bit of money into sort of a one-time, things that don't necessarily cover capital. They might cover engineering, and they might cover something like that, that comes to you throughout the year. So the bulk of it is coming from our capital stabilization fund. The ambulance, the 90,103.19 covers the lease payment, 205 for the ambulance A1. And that comes out of the ambulance receipts account. So the money that we bill insurance or Medicare or Medicaid for ambulance runs builds up over the year. We use some of that as part of the budget process. We vote a certain amount, it was $1.7 million.
That's 2.1 million this year.
So it was a certain amount out of that fund goes to fund our actual fire budget. And then the balance gets held for use for paying for ambulances, essentially. So that's, yeah, that one's pretty straightforward. It's commitments that were made 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago.
So forth. Any questions for the town manager? Entertain a motion for that.
So moved.
And second, any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, next order is 0 FY 24-043 employee liability transfers contractual payments.
So I'll sort of back up a little bit and explain this from the beginning. So years ago, decades ago, a board of selectmen or a town meeting thought it'd be a good idea to encourage employees not to take sick time, not to abuse or take sick time. And the thought was, okay, if we agree to pay out something at the end of their employment for any accrued sick time, that'll improve, it'll make absentee rates, better and so forth. I guess it was a popular thing to do back then. We've negotiated that out of most of our contracts, if not all, but we still have sort of the old timers who are just now hitting retirement for the most part. And so it does exist for some of those collective, in most of the collective bargaining agreements, it exists for the people who were here as of 2010 or 2012 or 2009, whenever that was negotiated out of the contract. So as I just mentioned about when you allocate free cash, part of it you allocate to the employee liability fund, and that's based upon we can't tell when people are going to retire. We can only just guesstimate. So we try to guesstimate, what it's going to take for the next fiscal year, and that's how we come up with that amount to allocate to the employee liability fund. And so $89,960 covers two employees, I think. There's two employees, and one retired from many years of service at the library, and the other one not as many years of service, but a fair stretch at the fire department. So that is what that is.
Thank you for the explanation. Any questions?
Just one, if I may. So the employee liability fund, that's not OPEB, is it? Or
No.
it is? No, okay.
No, that's the other thing we allocate money to.
Yeah.
So OPEB is other post-employment benefits. Basically, it's retiree health insurance.
Hmm.
So we are, the accounting rules changed about 10 years ago and 12, 15 years ago. And now we had to, carry that liability on the books. So our liability is 38 million or something, 37 million. And we allocate, maybe 200,000 every year. So, in 478 years, we'll actually be caught up. But it is something that every town struggles with. In order to adversely affect your bond rating, you would not fund anything in your OPEB account, or you wouldn't have an OPEB account. That's a sure way to make sure your bond rating is not going to be very good. So what they like to see is that you've established an OPEB account, and we've done that with Plymouth County. We're part of the Plymouth County. Can't remember what. Yeah. So it's a group that Plymouth County put together, and people bought into it. It's just it sort of improves the size of the amount of assets that are under management. So it's a less expensive investment tool for us. In any case, and not to get too deep and off track, we'll do it in 1 minute. So right now we're paying catch up on retirement. So in 2030, I believe, Plymouth County will be done having to pay in the $2 or $3 million or $4 million or $5 million that we pay in every year for retirement. So we will have caught up because the retirement system had the same problem as the retiree health insurance system. It was just a pay-as-you-go system. It wasn't actuarially done correctly. So everybody's a little more sophisticated now. So we're getting to the end of the time when we have to contribute extra money to the retirement system to play catch up in 2030. So the widely assumed notion is that the legislature, when we get closer to 2030, and a lot of retirement systems are done funding, that the legislature will then say, okay, now you're done with that, we're going to switch that to other post-employment benefits, OPEB, and you'll fund that. Instead of having that obligation compounded on top of the retirement, we're just going to switch, now that you're done paying the retirement backlog, where you're now going to put that money towards OPEB, and then for the next 20 years, we'll be paying to fund OPEB. That's what's widely assumed. Whether it happens or not, who knows. But in any case, they're separate. OPEB is a separate entity, a separate animal, and this is just our local sick buyback obligation, basically.
Question? Who wants to make this motion?
Motion to accept.
Have a second? All in favor?
This is the
Aye.
prize.
Okay. Unanimous. Next one is Order 0 FY 24-044 end of the year transfers.
Okay, so at the end of every year, we make adjustments and transfer money from departments and line items that haven't been used to offset areas where we have had to use more than we anticipated. And it's usually right about this amount every year. There are a couple of quirks to this one, but I'll run through it quickly. So the sources of funds, and I apologize, it's municipal accounting that shows a deficit. It's actually really, it's not a deficit, it's the opposite. So the reserve fund is something that's voted in the budget every year, and it allows the finance committee to make a decision if something horrible happens during the year, a boiler goes and we don't have any other source of funding. It allows the finance committee to free up that money. Knock on wood, we didn't need it this year, and I hope we don't need it for the next 12 days or so. So that is a source of funding within the operating budget. Finance, 20,000 freed up from something. I think it's software or something that we did not proceed with. IT, we had an empty position for a chunk of the year, so there's 20,000 there. Same with CED, town buildings. Same, we had money there for a position that we couldn't fill. Police, I can tell you the police, very good. Every year they turn back money, which is great for us, but not great for them because usually it means they haven't been able to fill positions. I think,
They have some open, an open captain and a couple
you know,
sergeants.
so they've got some open positions that haven't been filled yet. Same with inspectional services. The BR Capital, so last year, right? Rainham couldn't maintain what we were prepared to give the school pursuant to our revenue sharing program. So under revenue sharing, we look at our projections of revenue, and any increases we share proportionally with the school. So, you know, we think we're going to make $100,000 more than we did the year before, then 55,000 goes to help them. And that's just as an example. So instead of, we wanted to make sure that each year we are tracking that revenue sharing. And so we didn't want to retrench and shrink what we were prepared to give the school. So we set that aside in the event that we were going to need it for capital, school-related capital. That was fine. It was all, you know, transparent, absolute full knowledge of the school, schools or the district. And so, so that money now appears there. And I'll get down below, I'll get to the result of that. Highway position not filled, savings on street lighting, library position not filled. They've gone through a fair amount of turnover. And then, so that's the use, that's the sources. The uses are a minor shortfall in town council, or less minor shortfall in town manager. Finance, also, so we're taking money out of one.
Yeah. We
And
took
then-
expenditures that were available. So some of them are transferring it from salary to expenditure to salaries inside their buckets.
Within the departments, yeah.
But they still need to be voted.
Legal, that's outside expenses related to either labor attorney fees or recording expenses or, you know, things that Jason's office does not handle. Same HR, we transferred the HR obligation fully into the HR this year and in next year's budget as well.
We created a new department, so it was in another area, so that HR.
And then, so town building expenses outpaced what we had budgeted significantly. So that's one where we took the salary and we're basically using the salary to offset the expense. And so police expense, there was required trainings that they had to do due to the post requirements, the state post requirements. Fire, 175 covers overtime. They've had a few of the guys out on either work-related or not work-related injury, so that's incurred. And so that's been incurred a lot of overtime. So Bristol Aggie, I'll run Lori's favorite topic.
Is that the transportation?
Yeah.
The 189?
The 189 is, what's the 189 on the expenses? Well, it's all expenses.
Transportation.
Is that
That we did-
transportation and the additional kids?
Well, the additional tuition was 4,400 because they had an extra student or something. The 189 is the transportation costs of the students that we didn't incur up until this fiscal year. So it wasn't in our budget.
How
So
many kids from Bridgewater go to that school?
to Bristol, 11 or 13. So,
Okay, it's a good amount.
And it's a lot because there is no agricultural school.
Well, it's closer than the Norfolk.
Yeah.
Yeah, they call it out of
This one's in
district.
Dyke.
So we weren't paying this expense because what was happening was that there were few enough students that they could just go over the line to Rainham. Rainham is a member of, obviously, Bristol County. So they could go over the line, hop on the bus in Rainham, and off they go. So we never had to budget for transportation expense. Now we do, because there are too many kids to be able to get on the bus in Rainham
To go to this
to go
school.
to Bristol.
So it's supposed to become very popular because high schools aren't doing that much.
So Bristol Plymouth Tech School, which we are a member of, we send about 111 kids, 112 kids to that.
And the transportation is in their
Right.
assessment.
Is
Do you get
included.
funding from school choice from the state at all?
So we don't get funding for this. So we get incoming, we get paid school choice and we have to pay school choice. So
In and out.
the delta, unfortunately, we pay about 900,000, something like that, for going out to pay for our kids going somewhere else. We only take in about 160, something like that, 160,000 come to us. So there's an imbalance, which is not good. So
Do you try to recruit these kids once they graduate to work in Bridgewater? I mean, you got the
Yeah, we do.
electricians, the plumbers.
Yep, we do. We actually have, we've gone down to Bristol Plymouth for some of our trades. We haven't been as successful there. We've gone down to, what's the community college down?
Sorry?
No, it's not necessarily Bristol. No, I thought it was down in, but we have had success there. So we have
I
that
just
sort of a
figured when
traveling
these
roadshow,
High schools are putting so much money into it, if we could get them to,
get something back.
yeah, even if they worked at the college, you know, the grounds, plumbing, whatever.
So the good news is the kids that go, I'm not sure about the agricultural schools, kids that go to Bristol Plymouth, they all have jobs before they graduate, which is
Yeah.
incredible. Or they go off to college.
They help with town projects. and
The
things.
senior center, and now they're gonna do that pavilion.
The Pavilion,
They
in a
did the
couple of
police
years.
The outbuilding,
Yeah.
yeah.
Outbuilding.
My oldest grandson like that, became an electrician before he was even, his senior years working.
It's an impressive school.
Yeah.
It was really
is.
impressive
And they
school.
go-
Yeah, they're building a brand
Impressive
new-
one or two ago.
Yeah.
I know, it's been delayed, which is the only thing.
And plus, they do a lot of healthcare nurses, which is really need. Nurses nice.
So anyway, that is the 189, that is all transportation expense. And that was because we hadn't budgeted for that because, as I said, they traditionally just hop the Rainham bus that goes to Bristol Aggie. Norfolk Aggie is, I think that 58,000 is a combination of, isn't that a combination of?
No, that's just tuition that
Oh.
we had paid. The transportation, we had been paying that because we have been, that was about 78,000, which is almost as much as the tuition. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
But okay, so that one we just, they tell us by April, when we submit the budget, they really don't know how many kids are gonna be there. They'll tell us how many kids are currently there. And it might have information on how many kids have
October
applied.
1st, they usually give us
Right.
the actual enrollments based on kids
Right,
either
right.
staying or going to that school.
So then we're sort of always, it's like,
Yeah,
we're
it's
always
a
playing catch up.
guess, yeah.
And I'll just hit the big things. The library expenses, so they've had some issues over there with things that don't necessarily, haven't hit the building maintenance account.
Mhm.
Is there anything that we done with the columns?
Yeah, we talked about that today. Is that today?
I was told they weren't structural,
They're not structured.
but they look so bad.
They're awful. So we're gonna have we're gonna put, excuse me, an RFP out to do a whole building analysis, so we know, because you guys have voted money over the years for a whole bunch of different sort of cosmetic things over there.
Yeah.
And I just am concerned that that cosmetics isn't what we need to do right now.
Yeah.
And we need to have our arms around exactly what needs to be done. the more we do that, the more we can tap the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners for and from the mutual aid. So that's kind of where we're headed over there before we spend a lot on cosmetics. Debt service.
No, it's for the interest on the.
For Bristol Plymouth. Oh, the fire station. All right. Yep, that's just interest on the bond anticipation notes for the fire station. County assessment, we're off by $1.
I don't like to be in the red.
It's an embarrassing situation.
It's all rounding.
And then just unemployment.
We have some pending cases from, so we just had to, might not even need it, but we wanted to make sure it was there and we'll cover it in case.
Is that the same with medical?
Yeah, well, the medical, we had a lot of changes this year that we're still like digging into it because a lot of younger individuals, say fire or police, have got married and they went from individual to family, and it just like it was just that time. Every few years, every 4 or 5 years, it's like it goes up and then it drops off again. But yeah, that's what we saw this particular fiscal year.
And then the gasoline, obviously gasoline price. We are locked into a contract, but that contract also allows for fluctuations. So.
And then we did have to fix that depot. We had like a $15,000 expenditure. They had to empty it out and clean it all out because there was some problem, which was unanticipated as well.
Very thorough explanation. So do I have a motion to? No motion to second. Any more discussion? All in favor? Okay. Order 0 FY 24-045, acceptance of grant, Council on Aging, Massachusetts Home and Community-Based Services.
So this one is in addition to a prior grant, and it's an additional little over $100,000 through the state. Goes to the Council on Aging's existing program that they're getting up and going for dementia-friendly individuals.
The program's gonna grow huge.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I know. Well, with a lot of things that we're doing at the senior center and elder services, we're trying to gauge what the pent-up demand is. I mean, that's Bridgewater Cares transportation is the same kind of principle. So once we know what the demand is, then we can really focus on getting permanent funding. And that's always the objective. But we want to see what it is. We don't know what it is here.
I've been involved in it, and it's gonna fill. Especially because you know who's gonna run right. So everyone wants to be on.
It's been certainly a big void that hasn't been filled.
Yep.
So it's nice
Yeah,
to
it
see.
gives caregivers a break,
Yeah.
and then there's no support for caregivers who work,
Right.
so it's tough.
Mhm.
Any more questions?
I'd make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and last order is 0 FY 24-046, transfer order, rebinding of death records.
Compelling reading.
Yeah.
But yeah, we do keep, obviously, that we're digitizing records back in 1857. But so we have paper records that need rebinding. And so the community preservation has recommended the expense to be paid out of the community preservation funds. And this is just that appropriation.
Motion,
Motion to accept.
second, all in favor? Aye. Okay. We're done with our agenda items. I don't think anyone's added to the 3 people on public comment, correct, Deb?
Probably is.
Fell asleep.
She might be in the council change.
She might be.
Okay, so no public comment, and I will take a motion to adjourn.
So
Okay, and second.
Second.
Okay, 6:50 PM, all in favor? Aye. Thank you all.
excellent.